I have a democracy fetish. I'm fascinated by the thing. It doesn't mean I always love it, but it does mean I remain fascinated in it. I remain desirous of it. I am hopeful that we can engage with it and make democracy better. And I'm grateful to our next guest, Drew Penrose from fairvote.org, who's going to talk to us about ranked choice voting and what just happened in an election last Tuesday. Drew, calling from Maryland. How you doing?
Good. Glad to be on the show.
So give us the update. So ranked choice voting, do you want to do the update first or describe ranked choice voting first? Why don't we describe ranked choice voting first? What the heck is it? A lot of our listeners know it. We have a bunch of nerds like me who listen, but there's some less nerdy people who probably want to know as well.
Sure. It's not just for nerds anymore. We're in the mainstream now. Ranked choice.
Is that the brochure? Is that
right?
I put the first emphasis on the first syllable of brochure. It's not for nerds anymore. Anyway, keep going.
Right. Yeah, ranked choice voting is it's a method of voting, and it's not too different from what people do today. In most places, you just choose your favorite candidate, and whoever happens to get the most votes is the one that winds up winning the election. Ranked choice voting, it's just like that. You choose your favorite candidate, except if your favorite candidate can't win, you actually get to say, well, this is my backup choice, this is my second choice, this is my third choice, and so on. That way, when you count up those first choices, if nobody has a majority of the vote, you eliminate the candidate in last place. And if your favorite candidate, your top choice, is eliminated, then your vote counts for your backup. Your vote counts for your second choice. And you just repeat that.
What's the difference between ranked choice voting and instant runoff voting? Same thing?
Yeah, the instant runoff voting is another word that's used for ranked choice voting in some places. Technically, ranked choice voting can also apply to other forms of voting where you rank your choices. For example, it's used in multi-winner elections as a form of proportional representation, which is also a really good thing. But it's not the form of voting that was used in most places that used it this past Tuesday.
And this has mostly been an idea, right? I mean, it's mostly been something that some math nerd would say, hey, here's a better way to actually do this stuff. Or sometimes maybe after like the Ralph Nader election, they say, oh, well, here's after George W. Bush beats Al Gore, there are people who say, oh, here's another way we could do it. But it's been just kind of an idea. What places have actually enacted before Tuesday? Who's actually used it? Maybe San Francisco? Who else?
Right. So that's what I would have said when I started at FairVote, I think. At the time, it felt like it was just something that I had heard about it and seemed like a really great idea to me. And when I talked to people about it, it seemed like a good idea to them. But it wasn't something that a lot of people had known more viscerally. However, the uses of it have really exploded in the United States. So I could, list off the places that are using it today. Yeah, so in the California Bay Area, you've got San Francisco, Berkeley, San Leandro, and Oakland. And
actually, we should say this is a perfect time to say what just happened Tuesday, because I think a big jurisdiction just adopted this, yeah?
That's right. So the big news is that New York City adopted ranked choice voting, the instant runoff form of ranked choice voting, for use in their primary elections citywide. Now, the use of ranked choice voting in New York City more than triples the number of people in the United States using ranked choice voting. So it really does. And that's, in 2016, Maine, the state, adopted it for all of its statewide elections. It used it for the first time for federal congressional elections in 2018. It's going to be using it in 2020. They actually expanded it to include their presidential election as well, so it'll be used for president in Maine in 2020. But even with Maine using it, counting everybody in Maine, New York City still triples the number of people.
And in terms of budgetary size, and at risk of promoting Michael Bloomberg's candidacy for president and bolstering his bona fides, the New York City, here's a fun fact for you who like fun facts. New York City is the third biggest government in terms of budget in the United States. First, the U.S. government. Second, state of California. Third is the city of New York, because they also run their schools. Whereas in our state, in California, for instance, the schools are run and funded by the state. So New York, was it a close vote in New York?
Oh, no, not at all. There was no doubt as to what New Yorkers wanted. It passed with about 75% in favor.
So 75% in favor, vote in New York. That makes it the biggest jurisdiction, multiplies the number of people who live in realms with ranked choice voting. Go ahead and continue your list of now who else has it. Did you get through it all already, or anybody left?
Oh no. So I mentioned Maine. I mentioned the 4 cities in the California Bay Area. A couple cities in New Mexico. So Santa Fe used it for the first time in June of 2018. Went really well there and expanded almost immediately to the city of Las Cruces, New Mexico, who used it for the first time this past Tuesday. A couple of cities in Utah used a form of ranked choice voting. That was a bill that passed with broad bipartisan support out of the Utah state legislature to allow cities to do it, and 2 of them picked it up, Payson and Vineyard. Few cities in Minnesota.
Which Utah towns? I know Utah somewhat, but I don't know those towns. Say them again.
Okay. They're both pretty small towns. So there's Payson, Utah, and Vineyard, Utah. They're both in Utah, Utah County. Yeah.
And they're doing that for their city council races?
That's right. Yeah, they used it for a few city council seats, 3 seats in Payson, 2 seats in Vineyard, and they'll use it in their mayoral elections next election cycle.
Keep going.
Okay, a couple places in Minnesota. So Minneapolis has been using it for a while. St. Paul had an election this past Tuesday. They added St. Louis Park, which used it for the first time just this past Tuesday. So 5 places across the United States used it for the very first time just this past Tuesday. So you want to talk about the momentum that this is growing with.
What do you chalk up? And one of the things I find fascinating about your list, it's not all just fluffy-hearted blue places, right? I mean, this is, when you mention Utah, first the Utah legislature had to allow it, and then a couple towns in Utah actually had to install it. This is something that seems to have appeal across what otherwise seem like impenetrable partisan barriers. What do you chalk that up to? What do you ascribe the momentum to?
Absolutely. It's a completely nonpartisan reform. Just sort of a smarter way of doing elections. You know, the way we do them now, choosing only one, has a certain kind of intuitive appeal. It's simple, but I think after we've been using it for a while, we've started to see some consequences to it that we don't like too much. So one is that a lot of these places, the cities in Utah, for example, were holding runoff elections. So you hold a second election. And there's a simple reason not to like that. It's expensive. You know, you have to spend a bunch of money to hold a second election to have people come back to try to get majority support. And then not that many people wind up showing up for the runoff election anyway, which often undermines the whole point of holding it, you know, of getting that majority support. Ranked choice voting allows you to consolidate that into a single election